Hi, everyone. Welcome to the week of May 26th through the 29th. This week, we have broken down the lessons into 2 days, but of course, you can work however it works out for you best. Day one is a lot shorter than day two, just so you know. So we're starting off with your check-in, right? Respond to this week's personal check-in prompt. The second step is to read through the slides, which I'm going to go through here, and to come up with your protagonist, which you might have already done when we did our character sketches last week, antagonist, and tension. And you post those to the discussion board. All right, so you can either continue to work on what you've done over the last 2 weeks with a setting or character, or you can write about brand new characters and places within the plot that you established. Next week, so this week essentially we're going to come up with the storyline which is your plot, and figuring out the different parts of that. And next week, you're going to have the opportunity to expand on your plan to actually write out your entire story if you like. And if you don't want to move forward with it, there's going to be another option. So, tension. To have any good story, you have to have tension. Otherwise, it's just an account. It's not really a story. So we have gone over these slides before we were out of school. So this is just a reminder. Your protagonist is your main character. It's the central figure at the good story who the reader gets to learn about or changes as a result of the plot. And they don't have to be good, right? There can be characters that aren't good or that don't do good actions. The antagonist is the source of tensions. So it can be a force that prevents the protagonist from achieving their goal. So it doesn't have to be a person. It could be the character themselves, right? So the tension could be a battle, an internal battle within themselves. A lot of really good stories have multiple antagonists. Sometimes, often they're an external one or two or multiple, and something within the character that they're fighting themselves. So the tension is the resistance that the protagonist finds in achieving their goals. So, in a good story, it's more complex than the term conflict, right? Because it's not necessarily just external. It could be external and internal. There's a dynamic going on. External tensions are the obvious ones: a battle, an argument. It's character versus character, character versus nature or something supernatural, or character versus society in a group. This one has a link that I showed, I believe, in class. If you wanted to check out a clip from a movie about a character versus the supernatural, right? An external tension, something outside of themselves. Internal tension can be trickier, a deeper kind, something that a character is struggling about in themselves, right? Like I think of the character Luke Skywalker, right? He is battling something within himself, about the Force, right? There are several things he is internally conflicted about, and he has to work those out. It depends on the character's needs and wants, right? Do they want to be all powerful, or do they want to help, the galaxy? So it can depend on their fears and weaknesses, right? We all have a lot of internal tension in our lives, especially around things that we fear, right? So like, oh, I really love to be in this play, but I'm afraid of getting up in front of people. That is your internal conflict or your tension within yourselves. And this really gives characters and stories depth, because this is what we identify, because everyone has internal struggles throughout their lives, right? So, for example, when we read Thank You, Ma'am, the protagonist, who do you think that was in Thank You, Ma'am? Right? The main character. Who was the antagonist in Thank You, Ma'am? And what was the source of tension? So we're just going to think about that for a second, and the answers are on the next slide. So the protagonist was Roger, right? He didn't start off as a good character. He was actually trying to take Mrs. Jones' purse, right? But he is the primary character, and he changes as a result of the plot of him getting caught and the kindness that Mrs. Jones showed him. The antagonist was the forces that were getting in his way of getting his desire, right? He wanted to get the money for the shoes, but Mrs. Jones keeps him from stealing her purse from her and from running away, right? She gets in the way of his goal, and as a result, he changes. So what's the source of tension in the story? Well, you have two. There are internal and external in this story. Both Mrs. Jones, because physically she's keeping him from getting her purse and the money, but also Roger is struggling internally with whether or not he can trust her, right? And whether or not he can make her trust him, right? So that gets a little more complex and interesting. And the writer does all of that in a really short story, which is very skilled. Let's see. So for day one, which I said is pretty, shouldn't take you more than 20 minutes, is you're starting to plan for your future story. If you already did a character that you want to stick with from last week, this should be easy, right? So who's your protagonist? Describe your character. You might have that all figured out. What is your character's central goal, right? What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to achieve something internally about themselves or external in the world? Or both? Who or what is the antagonist that's getting in the way of your character achieving their goal, right? Sometimes their goal might not be clear, like they might not know completely what it is, but they're driven to figure something out, right? So antagonist is describe that character or trait of your antagonist. If it's something that the trait would be something that the character is struggling about within themselves. Oh, and that actually, there's a link back at the internal tension right here that you can see a clip of an example from a movie of an internal monologue about a character struggling with themselves. Okay, back here. And then the last thing is, what is the main source of tension in the story? Is it character versus character versus nature or supernatural, character versus society, character versus self? Describe one way the tension has revealed itself in your story. Or if you have more than one, put those. All right, and that is day one.